Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Malicious Compliance. In today's episode, manager forces me to get a doctor's note despite it being illegal to do so. Doctor writes him the most passive-aggressive note, signing me off for 2 weeks instead of 2 days to teach him a lesson. HR doesn't want to deal with too many child sick pay requests, no problem. Boss firing me without a warning and fucking up the termination. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Manager forces me to get a doctor's note despite it being illegal to do so. Doctor writes him the most passive-aggressive note, signing me off for 2 weeks instead of 2 days to teach him a lesson. I posted this, but it got removed, and I think it was maybe because I didn't make the malicious compliance clear enough, so I'm going to try again and make it extra clear. When I was in my early 20s, I worked at a supermarket. I should note that I was a pretty reliable employee. I was never late, in fact, I often got in early, and I rarely called in sick. At the time this happened, I had not called in sick for 9 months, and even then, the manager had sent me home. I had been up all night, swinging between burning hot and freezing cold, so I was obviously feverish, and I had been throwing up at both ends, shall we say. At one point at about 2 a.m. I was on the toilet, with my head in the sink, utterly miserable. I must have passed out because the next thing I knew I was lifting my head off the sink and it was 7 a.m. I was due to start work at 12 that day, but that obviously wasn't going to happen. So I called up the manager. Let's call the manager Steve. Steve was known for being a real a-hole. He never believed anyone who called in sick except his best buds, usually other managers, never lowly staff, but often called in sick himself. A lot of the time we knew it was because he was hungover and not actually sick. The conversation went as follows. Me, hey Steve, sorry, I can't come in. I'm sick. Steve, with what? Me, I don't know. I think it might be the flu. I've been up all night being sick, and I have a fever. Steve, don't be stupid. If you had the flu, you'd be completely knocked out. I need you in. Come in or you're fired. Me, I can't. I just told you I can't stop vomiting. I passed out. Steve, growling angrily, either come in or bring a doctor's note, or you're fired. In the UK, you are legally allowed to self-certify for 5 days. This means you can tell your employer you are sick and you do not need a doctor's note. If you're sick for more than 5 days, you then need a note. It is also illegal to demand a doctor's note during the self-certify period. I knew this, but I was terrified. This was during the recession. I couldn't afford to lose my job. So I got myself dressed. Almost passed out trying to do so. Then trudged to the doctor's some 25 minutes walk away. I end up sitting in the doctor's office for a little over an hour, which for walk-in was pretty good. I get in to see the doctor and she is furious at me for coming in. You're not supposed to come to the doctor's when you have a cold or flu, and of course I knew I should be able to self-certify. She told me as such, saying I shouldn't be here and should have stayed at home. I then explained what had happened with Steve and how he had threatened to fire me over this, and I couldn't afford to lose my job. I was struggling as it was. My doctor turned her anger towards my manager. She asked if I got sick pay from the company, and I said yes. He wants a sick note, does he? The doctor says. Okay. I'll give him a sick note. Now, my manager just wanted a note confirming I was sick, but instead my doctor wrote something along the lines of this. My name has come to the surgery because manager name has insisted she come in spite of the fact that this is illegal and all employees are allowed to self-certify. Due to being forced to make this unnecessary and highly dangerous trip when the patient is ill, has a fever of 39 degrees Celsius, and almost passed out in the waiting room, I am signing my name off for 2 full weeks to recover. Had my name been allowed to self-certify as is the law, they might only have needed a few days, but due to straining themselves, they now require 2 full weeks. They are not to be permitted to work until, date 2 weeks later. The doctor said she would have signed me off longer, but this was the longest she could do without requiring further evidence. So basically, instead of just being off for a few days, I was now signed off for a full 2 weeks, and I'd be paid for it. I went to my place of work, at which point one of the duty managers saw me and asked me what the heck I was doing here. Go home. I was obviously very unwell. I explained what happened. They agreed to help me downstairs to Steve's office and went with me inside. I handed Steve the note. He looked worried and tried to say I wasn't being serious about firing you. Well gee, when you angrily growled it down the phone it sure sounded like it. The duty manager then declared that they were going to drive me home. It was clear Steve wanted to argue but had the sense to know he shouldn't. The duty manager then drove me home, made sure I was okay, then went back to work where they informed our union rep of what had happened. Steve had a disciplinary hearing where he was given a severe reprimand and a warning. Steve tried to argue he never said I'd be fired and I was lying and just decided to go to the doctors, but the duty manager said they heard him admit to it when he said to me that he really didn't mean it. I felt better after a few days, and enjoyed my 2 weeks off, fully paid, and enjoyed the nice weather we had. Meanwhile, Steve was forced to work overtime because we were short-staffed. So thanks to the doctor, instead of being off for a few days, I ended up getting a nice 2-week paid vacation, and Steve was given a final warning, all because he insisted I get a doctor's note. Edit. To clarify the whole "you're not supposed to come in when you are ill." I should have been more specific. The rule is you're not supposed to come in when you have a cold or flu. The reason is there's nothing a doctor can really do except recommend you take over-the-counter cold and flu meds. So it is recommended that you do not come in if you have a cold or flu and instead take meds at home or pick some up at the pharmacy instead of risking infecting those waiting in the surgery. Even then, it's not a hardcore rule, more a common courtesy asked of people. If you really want to, you absolutely can. He wants a sick note, does he? The doctor says. Okay. I'll give him a sick note. Menace drips from every syllable. I know it's not the point of the story, but respect to the duty manager for backing the employee's claim that Steve threatened to fire him. Often managers stick together. It's rare a manager will openly go against another during a disciplinary. Yeah, definitely wondering what kind of consequences there will be for the duty manager. It's possible this was a pattern and the duty manager wanted the manager gone as well so it would stop being a problem with the union, but phew, that's a lucky break for OP. If Steve was on a final warning, he's done other pretty bad things too. Other managers probably think he's a dick too and want rid. In Canada, some doctors started billing the companies directly who demanded doctor's notes for routine illness. If I'm ever in this situation again, I'm requesting my doctor do this. Company demands it? Company can pay the $15,000 for an ER visit over bullshit. This is the norm in my company. We usually ask for a doctor's note after 2 weeks and we pay the bill from the doctor's office. In cases where it's an employee who has a noticeable amount of stand-alone sick days or what looks like a strong case of the Mondays, we sometimes ask before the 2 weeks are up. I hope he was salaried and not hourly, too, which made working overtime even more arduous for him. Yup. He was salaried. Managers were all salaried, while staff were all hourly. In the UK, that doesn't mean what you think it does. Your salary is to work your contract, which includes X hours per week, usually in the form between A and B hours with C for lunch. Overtime will be paid at some rate in there. Looks like he learned that the old my way or the highway doesn't work. I sometimes fantasize about living in a country where workers have rights. In the US, your CEO can tell you that you should work from home after surgery even if you're on PFL or out under the FMLA. Not legally, but they'll do it. So I got my doctor to extend my recovery time to 8 months as needed. Next time I applied for FMLA, they fired me for sending personal business emails from my personal account while I was not supposed to be working and wasn't getting paid for it. They called me disloyal and reminded me that I was a servant, not a person with agency, when I signed up to work for them. HR doesn't want to deal with too many child sick pay requests, no problem. My wife and I are both working, and meanwhile our 2 kids are in daycare if they are not sick. Our agreement was that if a child is sick, one stays home the first day, the other one the next day, and so on until the child is fit again or one of us catches it too. On the one hand, that way care work is split evenly amongst us, and on the other hand, nobody misses suddenly work for an extended time. We are entitled to 30 days of child sick pay per child and per parent. It doesn't cover everything, but IIRC about 85 to 90%. Because we are alternating each day, we get 1 doctor's notice per day and split them accordingly among us. Instead of 1 notice for a week, we would have 5 which we submit to our employers and health insurance to deal with each other and get paid. HR, coincidentally the wife of my manager, told me that it is too much hassle to deal with a few papers instead of a single one, and that one of us should stay at home, implying my wife, as it's sadly still pretty normal for the mother to deal with care work. We did comply, but I will take my paid child sick days until I run out, and then my wife will start to cover it. Since then our children were sick twice and I stayed home the whole time, 3 days and a week. My manager asked why I wasn't coming in as I used to and that some orders nearly missed their deadlines. I said HR, his wife smiling face with halo, wanted it that way, and I still have around 50 days of child sick pay left. I really enjoyed the look on his face. Before anyone assumes anything, my employer is great, and I have a good relationship with my manager and the owner. Cries in my 10 days of American PTO. PTO is for vacations, isn't it? Or do you have to use them as sick days too? What bothers me the most is that society still expects and assumes the mom to do most of the childcare. Dad can and will do the job well. I am a father of 2 and I take pride doing so. I used to get so annoyed when my son's primary school would phone me to say he was sick or hurt. I work half an hour away and need to exit through security. My husband works from home, which is about 500 yards from the school entrance. Oh, you should see me in a queue to a doctor with my 1-month-old daughter, all the mothers trying to help and giving funny looks. And even funnier ones when I demonstrated that not only I can do it, but probably better than them also. Those were the days. Is sick leave per kid a common policy in your country, or is it a company policy? It is federal law. The days were increased from 20 to 30 days per child and parent during the pandemic. Single parents have twice as much. The amount is capped at 65 days per parent, 130 for single parents. The employer has to keep paying if not excluded in the contract, but most do exclude it, and then the statutory health insurance covers it. This assumption drives me nuts. I'm the one who does daycare drop-off every day and I do pick up 4 days in 5, but if there's a problem during the day, it's my wife who gets the call or text. Inevitably, that leads her to getting in touch with me to do the pickup if the issue means the kids need to leave early. Communicate directly with me and cut out the middle, whoa, man? Nope, kids are the woman's work. Oh man, paid sick days for when my son is sick sounds like a dream. Would be so nice to be able to stay home and take care of him without stressing about work/pay, etc. I had worked in Europe for 6 months when I asked how many sick days I had left since my kids had been sick a lot and was told it was unlimited. I couldn't believe it, and honestly, I didn't see anyone taking advantage of it either. Boss firing me without a warning and fucking up the termination. I worked for a small company for the last 2 years as a software developer. And with small I mean that I was the only employee, so for many projects my boss had, I wrote the main part of the code base. In March, I made a mistake in one of the updates, and from then on, my boss made it a habit to yell at me at least once every day and tell me how stupid I am. Additionally, he started to call me outside of my working hours to demand fixes for problems that at the most part were his own mistakes. To be fair, my code quality started to go downhill after I had several mental breakdowns thanks to behavior. At the start of May, he said to me that he doesn't want to fire me, but would recommend that I find another job in the next month. So I applied to several companies and was waiting for the responses when he decided to terminate me nonetheless 2 weeks later. He wrote a termination letter and sent it to my home address, but didn't say a word to me. So I was quite shocked when I received the letter, which stated that I was fired starting July the 1st and that I should take my remaining 20 vacation days, which is the rest of my annual leave, in June. But in Germany, where I work, the employer is only obliged to give you the rest of your annual leave if you worked more than 6 months in the company for this year. Additionally, an important project, which I had been working on since February, was due in mid-June and not even close to finished, because my boss had prioritized tickets from other projects. So, I wrote my boss that I would like to take the vacation days immediately, as written in the termination, but if he needed help for finishing the current project, I would be willing to have the remaining vacation days be paid out to me. As soon as I sent the message, I saw in the chat program that he was typing. He answered that the number of vacation days in the letter of termination was a minor spelling mistake and that I only had 6 days left. After a quick chat with an attorney, friend of my parents, who started laughing when I told him of my boss's reaction, I wrote my boss a formal mail, in which I informed him that I would definitely take the vacation days, as stated in the letter, and because the termination also stated that the remaining vacation time will not be paid out, I will withdraw the regarding offer. The next week, he grudgingly accepted the 20 vacation days, and I will never forget the expression of defeat in his face at the last day, when he realized that the project he took a loan for was about to phenomenally fail, because I was the only one working on it and he didn't even try to understand how it works. His slogan always was, "As long as it works, I don't care." My brother's boss fired him for no real reason. He had an employment contract signed by the boss. They both go to HR, who didn't have a copy of it. My brother had a copy on his phone and sent it to HR. The HR woman, who hated the boss, said that they were halfway through the 3-year contract and, since the firing could not be shown for cause, the place had to pay out the rest of the contract. So my brother got to stay at home getting paid by them monthly for a year and a half while also collecting unemployment. I think by the time the unemployment ran out he found another job. He was in a high-income profession where it does take a while to get a job due to competition and the vetting process. He had no debts and his wife had a high-paying job, so most of the money went into savings. One of my peers had the inverse of that. He was given a formal offer letter with the wrong job title, one that was beneficial to him in our union contract. By the time our employer found out about the mistake, it was too late. Good, I'm glad the bastard got screwed and shot himself in the foot. Instant karma. I don't understand how he would think the company can carry on having fired the only employee he has. To be honest, I think he could not afford me any longer. He had to declare bankruptcy for the first time half a year after I started at his company, and I have a gut feeling he's running out of money. As long as it works, I don't care. Also known as mess around and find out, to those who do care enough to check in on how things work from time to time. Ick, my boss trusts me to do my own job, and I appreciate not being micromanaged. And if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, she's smart enough to decipher the SOPs I left behind. Management really doesn't need to know how every little detail of the operation runs. The boss's real problem here was not having another employee cross-trained to do OP's work. As long as your vacation days worked for you, you shouldn't care. The ideal size for just about any project is 4 people. Someone leaves, people get sick, stuff like that. The boss is a dunce. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.